Welcome to the Synergi BPO podcast, the region's first podcast focused on business process outsourcing and operational excellence. I'm your host today, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about technology services and how they contribute to business process outsourcing and business in general. I think we've seen over the last few years that technology has become much more than just a back office function. It's become a true enabler of the business. And for that reason, I'm really excited to have our guest today, Gary Draper, the Chief EMEA Officer of Chelsea Technologies. And I'd like to welcome Gary. Thank you for joining us. To start with, Gary, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about your role in Chelsea and what you do in the region.
Okay, Ahmed, pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for the opportunity. So I think, first of all, just a bit of background history around Chelsea Technologies. Chelsea Technologies was established in 1990 in New York by our then founder, Maya Ben Reuven, who is still very much a part of the business today. He's our group CEO. And if you think back to 1990, technology was still pretty basic, offices with desktops and floppy disk storage and then CDs and faxes and that sort of thing. So the business was sort of rooted in database development and then evolved into deploying applications for a number of customers. And then obviously moving later on then into the infrastructure side of things. Today, the business as an IT MSP provides managed IT services for some major businesses across the US. The business is able to provide those managed services, cloud services, cyber security, data migration, all the normal stuff that you'd expect from an IT MSP. As the business evolved and obviously technology grew, the business decided, our founder decided to focus on a couple of key verticals. The first one, which was alternative investments, so sovereign wealth funds, hedge funds, private equity, venture capital, highly regulated financial institutions was the first. The second was aviation MROs, so maintenance, repair, operations. And today we manage the IT services for a number of those across the US. And we've also, over recent years, been involved with a number of defence companies. So that's sort of the initial background. By 1999, the business had opened a further office in Florida, and over the 2000s has literally built up a global presence, if you like. Most recently, about 15 months ago, we opened the business in Abu Dhabi. And most recently, in the summer of 25, we established the Chelsea Tech Europe business in the UK. In terms of my role, just to go back, the business operates around a pod structure, essentially. So as a major customer, you would have access to a dedicated pod. As a smaller customer, it might be a shared pod. But within that pod, you will have access to dedicated team members. So that enables us to provide what we call a white glove service. I think the white gloves service enables us. It's like a concierge arrangement, if you like. It's meticulous, very client focused. Access to dedicated people that are available, if necessary, around the clock for customers that we support 24/7, 365. The business has grown to be a truly global business now. We have, as I said, mentioned 3 offices, but we have staff working within the business, literally from Asia through the Middle East, within this region, South Africa, UK, East Coast of America, and right across North America to West Coast. So we are really, able to offer the white glove, dedicated, meticulous service that we really enjoy providing for customers 24/7, 365. So that's where we are today. In terms of my role as Chief EMEA Officer, my role is that I am responsible for governance of the entities within the two regions, if you like, but also making sure that governance is aligned with our US business. I'm responsible for P&L ownership of the business, so making sure we're actually driving revenues and making profits. At the same time, preparing budget forecasts and assisting our finance team with making sure that everything's in order and reporting back so that we can have a set of consolidated business accounts for the US business. I'm also responsible for leadership, so ensuring that we have the right people in place, both here and the UK, to make sure that we can deliver the same quality of service that we have across the rest of the business. I'm responsible for managing customer relations, existing customer relations. We're very much about long-term partnerships and collaboration with our customers and our other partners. I'm also responsible for identifying opportunities in the region, and whilst we're currently set up in Abu Dhabi, our intention is to scale the business around the Gulf, and we're currently looking at other opportunities both in the Emirates and outside of the Emirates. So I guess those are my sort of key roles, if you like. I mean, there's lots of other stuff that sits underneath that, but that's the main points.
I think what stands out to me is the white glove service element, and I guess that's how you would differentiate yourselves.
Yes.
Among the larger, maybe more well-known IT MSPs.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes. Yeah, I think so, and I think that's one of the things that that encouraged or helped with our move to establish ourselves here in the region. We were providing the white glove service to major US customers, some of which are Emirates-based businesses that have branches in the US, and some are US companies that are opening branches here. And we were being told that the level of service that we provide and that we call white glove is second to none and is not the norm in the region. And I think certainly Emirates-based businesses that have branches in the US that we were fortunate enough to be introduced to and get involved with very much encouraged us, I think, to come and set up here, because we saw that there was a great opportunity to provide that level of service here.
I think it talks to a lot of what I have said of late as well, which is instead of BPO and equally IT MSPs being a cost driver, looking to purely drive cost, it's much more now a question of value and driving efficiency, driving actually bottom line to the businesses that they serve.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that, yeah.
So in terms of the drive to the region, you mentioned that part of the rationale for setting up in the region was seeing the demand from some of your current clients. How has that sort of played out over the last couple of months?
So, yes, as I said, that was the I guess the prompt, or one of the prompts for us to be here. Obviously, we had to make some decisions around how we structured the business here. I think it's really important that you, if you're coming to the region to set up, you have to get some key points agreed by your executive team first. The first being, do you want to be a mainland business or do you want to be set up in a free zone? Getting your activities that are scheduled on your license correct, so that you don't have any issues further down the line. We opted for the free zone business because it was important for us to have the 100% ownership for a start. So we decided to register in the ADGM in Abu Dhabi, which really puts us at the heart of the financial institutions and alternative investment businesses that we want to to serve. I think the ADGM for us, weren't really any challenges as such. We were fortunate enough to have some customers that were inviting us here to work with them, which obviously is a great start for any business establishing itself in a new jurisdiction. So we opted for the ADGM. The process was pretty straightforward. It's all digital, so I think as long as you've got the information that you need to tick all of the regulatory boxes, if you like, it's a relatively straightforward process, and that now gives us 100% ownership that we wanted. It gives us tax efficiencies. I think rules and regulations around where we can operate have also been loosened quite recently, which means that we can set up a mainland branch business whilst we're established with our main business in ADGM. So we can do that without an office. So it's made our life quite straightforward, really, in terms of how we can offer our services to people, whether they're free zone or mainland.
In terms of now with, of late, there's been a massive drive towards automation. And I'm sure that's very much relevant to what you do as well. What are you seeing when you speak to your clients in terms of, do you feel there's a risk of some businesses overestimating what level of efficiency automation can drive versus what operational drivers or levers there are?
Yeah, I think there is. I think one of the biggest problems that we've seen is that executives and boards tend to make a number of common assumptions. The first, I think, is that automation is going to solve all their problems. If you've got inefficient or fragmented processes in place before the automation comes on board, then that's clearly going to cause you some problems, because the automation just speeds up everything. So you go at a great pace, whether it's good or bad. And if it's bad, then obviously the outcomes are not favourable. So that's, I think, the first thing. The second one, I think, is around the assumption that automation will give insight. And I think that's still very much a human thing. And I think we're probably some way off being able to rely on it purely for insight into business and operations. And I think the third one, and it's sort of linked to that, I guess, is assuming that the AI or automation can replace human judgment. And, there will still be processes within any business where human judgment is still very much a part of that. And I think that's, whilst ultimately we'll probably move away from that, I still think it's some way off yet. So I think they're the sort of three things that should really be thought through thoroughly before making those decisions to take on board whatever automation it is.
We're seeing so many tools come out now of late, some of them very impressive, and businesses are really thinking about how to leverage them. But you're absolutely right. I think some of those foundational elements need to be in place first before you can actually start to leverage the power of these tools.
Absolutely.
Moving on to your core focus areas from what you said initially, financial services, MRO, so that's more aviation sort of space, as well as defense, all highly regulated industries. And the regulations also differ based on geography. In having this multi-jurisdictional setup, and also now with automation coming into play, how do you see this space evolving with this level of complexity, and where do you see bottlenecks when it comes to process or data as we move forward?
Yeah. Okay, so I think processes, so the three things you mentioned, processes, data, and execution. I think processes, there can be a tendency to overcomplicate and create overcomplex processes through maybe misinterpretation of local regulations or regulatory frameworks. So that can cause unnecessary problems. So, and I think the second point is around data and having inconsistent data across different borders and different countries. Having manual controls in place manual controls and approvals that become a bit of a bottleneck as automation speeds up various processes. And in terms of execution, again, I think and we may have touched on this before, but having the right skills locally. So, if you're used to operating in the US or in the UK or Europe or wherever, and then you're setting up in a new jurisdiction, it's making sure that you've got the right skill sets within the business. And also in terms of execution, making sure that you have proper oversight of third-party vendors that are operating with you to make sure everybody is aligned.
I can imagine it gets quite complex if you've got US-based institutions that you serve that are potentially SEC regulated. They then want to come into ADGM because we know right now there's a huge inflow of funds, asset managers into ADGM and into the UAE in general. And then they have to establish here, they have to then comply with ESCA regulations as well, many of which are going to be very similar, but then some of which are different. So I can imagine from a data standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, it can get quite complex, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the advantages that we have now as a business that operates across 3 very regulated jurisdictions. So we've got the US, UK, Europe, which obviously UK is not part of Europe anymore, but we still pretty much comply with all of their regulations, and obviously in the region here. So with us having businesses established in those 3 jurisdictions, it enables us to help our customers and guide them through any particular regulatory framework issues that they may not be aware of. So it really enables us to support businesses properly across 3 really key jurisdictions.
And also I'm guessing that helps with the 24/7 support, having teams in these different regions. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, we have help desk people, for example, in Philippines. We have a pod set up here in Abu Dhabi that is able to cover this region. We have help desk people in South Africa. We have technical staff and help desk people in the UK, and of course our major big part of the business, which is the US. Probably still at this stage, probably around 3/4 of our staff internationally are located across North America. So yes, it does give us the ability to go right across the time zones and provide that support, which a lot of MSPs don't provide. I have to say, they'll say they do, and they'll give you agreements with fast response times, but they often do not meet those targets. Whereas we pride ourselves in the quality of the delivery and the speed of response.
And if I may, I think this is where I've also seen the difference between Chelsea Tech and other MSPs in that there's much more of an on-site presence as opposed to a fully remote team. So there's much more focus on being close to the client.
Yes,
and serving them directly.
It is very much client-focused, client-centric. I think that's where the whole white glove label comes from, if you like. That said, of course, that's only really relevant, the people on site, on-prem staff, to customers that need that and are happy to accept the cost of that, because it does come with a cost. But it's not just about the people on site, it's about having this pod arrangement with dedicated people. So when somebody in Europe or wherever they are in Asia has an issue, they know who they're speaking to. It's not just a remote help desk that they're calling up and have no idea, and that person doesn't understand their business. doesn't understand the support levels they have. So it's important that that's key to our the way we deliver.
And that also, I guess, ensures scalability. So with the pod model, I guess as the business grows, you just continue to add pods to continue to support.
Correct, yeah. So there's a number of pods across the North America. We have a very young pod in the UK because that's the newest of our businesses, and we have a well-established pod here, which is not at its full capacity yet, but we expect to as we scale up the business, that pod will continue to grow, and when it gets to maximum capacity, we'll form a new pod.
I'm guessing in the work that you do, you often work with clients that also have other outsourced partners, whether it's BPO, shared services, types of partners. How do you see the relationship between IT MSPs and BPOs, and where do you see the synergies between what we do?
Well, I think there's lots of synergies, and I think it's I think that relationship is just going to grow more. I mean, particularly here where you have a lot of businesses, say, that are a major US business, for example, that has a small setup here. They don't want to carry the costs of having in-house back office services. They don't want the costs of having in-house IT services either. So the model of MSP and BPO working with them, it works very well. And if the MSP and the BPO are collaborating properly, then the outcome from the customer is much more favourable. They will see improvements in how their business operates. They'll make sure that they're running efficiently, that they're ticking all the right boxes in terms of regulatory frameworks and so on and so forth.
I think the regulations are key because you're working from a client standpoint. You're working with multiple service providers. You have to comply with all of these regulations, whether they're US imposed, UK imposed, UAE imposed, and that results in risk, compliance risk. Where do you see clients need to focus to be able to ensure compliance while also getting the value and the efficiency out of IT MSPs or BPO providers?
So I think it's, to answer your question, it's about data ownership primarily and governance. So making sure that you're working with a business that has a really comprehensive governance framework in place. Making sure that there's an understanding about how the data is managed and who has responsibilities for that, but also making sure that the business maintains ownership of its data, and that there are controls and balances in place to make sure that the right people have access to the right parts of that data, and you're not just giving over everything to your service provider. I think it's really important that businesses own their own data ultimately as far as possible to prevent. This may come a point in the future where they want to review their position with a particular service provider, and if they don't own the data or they have issues around the control and governance of that data, then obviously that's going to give them a real problem in moving away from that provider for whatever reason that is. And that may just be because their business is changing and they need to adapt and bring it in-house or whatever it is. But I think it's all about maintaining that ownership and control effectively.
Yeah, I guess it's an ongoing risk for any business, right? Is potentially over-reliance on one supplier. And I guess it's just part of business now because you work with so many different providers and some of them will be more key than others depending on the context. Going forward, how do you see this relationship between IT MSPs and BPO providers evolving now over time, as particularly in the region where we see the latest developments, business-friendly environment, a lot of flow of capital into the region, a lot of companies, including tech startups, looking to establish a presence here or launch here. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I think it's only going to grow and improve. I mean, ultimately, IT providers, whether it's an IT platform or whatever, or an MSP, enable a business. They enable the processes and functions to work within that business, whereas the BPO, if you like, embeds that into the business and makes sure that it's efficient and compliant in strictly in compliance with regulatory frameworks and so on. So I can see that, particularly in this region where there are, as you say, lots of funds coming in, and there's relatively small branch businesses. I think if you've only got to go into any of the business towers and see how many businesses are registered there. They're all relatively small. So I think that being able for the MSP and the BPO to collaborate, come up with a much more collaborative approach rather than just a pure transactional arrangement, I think that is going to strengthen that relationship.
Makes sense. The next 12 months or so, Chelsea, I know, has been in existence for a very long time.
35 years. Yeah, 36 years this year.
36 years now. That's quite a track record, and working with some really, really large institutions. How do you see the next 6 to 12 months from a GCC standpoint for Chelsea Tech?
So we are, now that we're established and we have some very high profile customers, I can't mention their names, but we have some very high profile customers, fortunate to have those in the region. Obviously, we want to leverage those relationships, build on them further, but leverage those relationships so that we can scale up the business here. We are probably for the next few months focusing on Abu Dhabi, but we are also having discussions with other businesses who are located in Dubai, for example, and potentially Saudi Arabia. The next 3 months is, let's say, short-term Abu Dhabi. Moving on from there, we will look to be trying to establish ourselves with these same sort of verticals in other parts of the Gulf, whilst at the same time trying to scale up the UK business as well, because as I said earlier, that's even newer than the business here. So I'm going to have a busy 12 months all in all, I think, across the EMEA. Sorry.
I can imagine it's not easy to position yourselves as a US-based company when traditionally, I think in terms of ITS MSPs, the market's been typically dominated by mostly the IT, the gigantic ones sitting over in India that are quite active in the region. But I do think there's opportunity, especially when it comes to that white glove service.
So I think we probably sort of touched on some of this. Yes, we do provide the white glove, meticulous, high-end level of service, very much customer focused. I don't believe that some of the bigger providers do that. They're more about driving their revenues with a much lower margin. And often when you do that, the focus from customer attention, you lose that. And we're finding that that's really important to our customers, and we hope it continues to be so.
Thanks again, Gary, for joining us. Really appreciate your time today and for your insights on this really interesting topic, especially now as we see technology evolving so much quicker than what it has been over the last few years. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks again for inviting us in, and I look forward to working with you closely in the region. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone that has tuned in for this. Appreciate your time, and keep your eye out for the next Synergi BPO podcast.